Plenty to talk about too with the Varroa mite. Of course, we're right in the ground zero with that. It's been a little over a year now that they've been trying to stop its spread, the little mite that preys on the honeybees. More than a year since they were first detected in the port of Newcastle, and that made many people very angry. The fight to eradicate the honeybee parasite is far from over. The mite's since been found in almost 200 hives, mainly here on the Central Coast and across the Hunter. Earlier this week, we told you about the petition with over 33,000 signatures tabled in State Parliament by the Animal Justice Party calling for the pesticide Fipronil that's being used to kill the wild bees to be banned. The ones, of course, feral bees, but infestations of the mite continues to be discovered, with the financial fallout running into the tens of millions of dollars. Recently, the government pumping another $33 million into, no doubt, buying more Fipronil. So can the country get it under control? The ABC's Keely Johnson has more.
They're like your pets. We had 13 little pets sitting out in the paddock, and to think that they were just got rid of that way, it's cruel, but unfortunately a necessary process.
That's Graham Creed. The former ABC weather presenter lost his hives after the Varroa mite was detected on a property near his hobby farm at Nauru on the mid-north coast.
They could just go down, shove some foam in the entrance, seal it up with tape, and then basically pour 2 cups of petrol into the top of the hive. The bees go ballistic for about 30-40 seconds, and then after a minute, that's it, it's all done.
Graham is one of hundreds of apiarists that have lost their hives in the biosecurity emergency response. To date, more than 26,000 hives have been euthanased across 1 million hectares of eradication zones.
I understand the process of what they're doing. I'm a science-based person, so I sort of get what they're doing and why they're doing it. But just the lack of information from the DPI, valuable information. They do provide you with updates and things like that, but we still don't know where it came from. We still don't know how it got this far, so over 100 kilometres in 12 months. The suspicion is that it's people that are moving their hives, but there's still no concrete evidence on that. People aren't being provided the information around that. And that's the hard part, because when you don't get that information, then people start making it up. And that's where you get all the conspiracy theories, and then that just muddies the water everywhere. So it's quite confronting when you're not being provided the information from an official source, yet there's all this information coming in from the sides.
Graham says he and many other beekeepers want more information around the feasibility of the response.
Yeah, a lot of people are really concerned that people are moving hives and that they're just bringing it ahead of the actual natural spread of the mite. And if that is the case, then how do you stop that?
Grafton-based apiarist Steve Fuller had 300 of his 4,000 hives euthanased. He says he'd also like more information from the DPI.
I know they're doing as best they can. This is a massive operation. It's a live beast. I understand that, but no one can give us costs. No one can give us direction. So when it comes down to lack of communication on top of all this, it is really, really hard to make any business plans. Like, how do I make plans for next year? I can't.
In a statement, a DPI spokesperson said the organisation sends out regular emails to all registered beekeepers and holds webinars every 6 weeks to ensure the industry is kept up to date. Steve is also the president of Crop Pollination Australia. He says European honeybees help pollinate more than 100 different fruits, seeds, nuts and vegetables.
You may not realise it, but 1 in 3 mouthfuls of food is actually attributed to bees through their pollination.
But due to restrictions on hive movement in New South Wales, many apiarists won't be able to get to Victoria for the almond pollination season.
Well, actually, this is a real critical time of the year because we're coming out of winter, so almonds are going to be one of the first crops that start into spring. So guys have already started moving bees down there. I've heard there's a lot of anxiety at the moment because if they can't get to the pollination, this could mean these guys' jobs or their livelihood. Once we finish the almonds, we go on to seed canola, we've got cherries, and we're really into spring. So pollination is paramount at this time. So we're setting our bees up now.
So, can Varroa mite be eradicated in Australia? The DPI says its eradication program has been hugely successful and is confident the Varroa mite is still technically feasible to be eradicated from Australia. The Australian Honeybee Industry Council Chief Executive, Danny Lefebvre, says all beekeepers must follow the rules for the Varroa mite response to be successful.
Yeah, if we have any hope of eradicating this pest, which is our goal, we do need all beekeepers to work together, as tough as that can be, and follow the rules. And without doing that, we really don't stand a hope at all of eradication. The experts around the country are saying that eradication is quite possible, but we need everyone to work together to do that. And if we don't do that, it will cause the mites to spread.
The Consultative Committee on the Emergency Plant Pests will meet this week to consider if the agreed-upon 3-year response strategy to eradicate Varroa mite in New South Wales by June 2026 is still feasible. Steve Fuller says, sadly, he's lost hope.
At this point in time, I can't see it being possible anymore. It's just getting out of hand. The amount of area that we are covering now, we're still finding new IPs and we're in winter. What's going to happen in spring? Look, I'd really love to see eradication, but I really don't think it's possible anymore.
We'll head to New Zealand a little later on too to find out how they're living with it, the apiarists there. Grafton-based apiarist Steve Fuller ending that report by Keely Johnson. The DPI says it's continuing investigations into how the Varroa mite was introduced into Australia. Sort of shutting the gate after the horse has bolted, isn't it? And mainly through epidemiological investigations, which it says do take some time. As New South Wales battles the spread of this mite, the pest that kills honeybees was first detected in New Zealand in the year 2000 and has since spread across the country, with most of the Central Coast now in the red eradication zone. It's just a tragic situation, and we'll hear from a beekeeper in just a moment who's hand-pollinating her garden. It's really sad. She's a permaculturalist as well and has beautiful, food-bearing plants and trees and things, but without the bees, she's so worried about not getting any food. That's the problem, isn't it? Is the cure worse than the disease with the Fipronil being put into the environment? But instead of trying to eradicate them like the DPI in New Zealand, they're living with the parasite. So how is it being managed? Martin Garside from the Aukland Beekeepers Club explains.
It was accidentally imported into the country, more than likely by a beekeeper bringing in some queen bees with her attendants, and it got through because nobody was actually looking for something like this, and it actually accidentally got into Auckland. Over the past years, it has slowly spread down from Auckland and then slowly spread all the way down to the South Island. At each year, the government has tried to draw a red line to say to try and stop it, but it's never worked, and it now covers the whole of New Zealand.
How are you coping? How are you coping with this disease, of course, that we're trying to eradicate right here at Ground Zero on the Central Coast and in Newcastle?
Well, everybody that's a beekeeper now is a farmer. And just like any livestock, you've got to look after your livestock. You've got to do regular inspections of your livestock. And if you notice anything, you've got to do treatments. And so it's just like any other livestock that any other farmer, whether you're a sheep farmer or a beef farmer, you've got to look after your livestock. So there are a number of different ways that you can tackle the Varroa problem. There's some harsh chemicals, mainly in names like Apistan and Apivar. There are some other slightly less chemical treatments in the thermal type of treatments that do work. And then you can go to the organic acids, formic acid or oxalic acid treatments for your bees. And there are even some mechanical ways you can do it, because it's been proved that the Varroa might prefer to breed in drone cells, the male cells, rather than the female cells, the worker cells. So if you allow a certain amount of your hive to build up with drones, you know that, and then destroy it after 42 days, which is the gestation period of a drone, you know that you can destroy a lot of the mites. So it's a case of just controlling it down to an acceptable level, because it's not actually the mite, the Varroa that kills the bees, but they carry a lot of pathogens, they carry a lot of viruses, and those are the ones that will eventually destroy the brood.
We're speaking with amateur beekeeper Martin Garside from the Auckland Beekeepers Club, 500 members, so that's a lot of hives. How productive are they living and coping with the Varroa mite?
Well, the urban area is actually in some ways better than the rural area because there's so much diversity of different trees, different plants, all blooming at different periods of the year. So there's always nectar, there's always pollen available in the city. Once you go out into the country areas, you might only have a season where there's actually something like clover, and it's there for a very short period of time, and then the bees suffer after that because they get a little bit hungry. So the city, you say an urban beekeeper, somebody has a better chance of getting a reasonable crop. And I'd say that a crop for us, for a hobby beekeeper, you're getting around about 30 kgs of honey per year per hive.
So it sounds as if you're coping and living alongside Varroa mite and able to maintain healthy hives with fairly non-invasive methods. I mean, Fipronil is something that, of course, is deadly to bees and other insects that was being used here locally at the moment. Did they ever resort to any of those measures in New Zealand?
No, not at all. They just try to limit the area and try and stop the movement of hives in and out. But of course it didn't work because as beekeepers we like to move around, we like to do our own thing. So unfortunately it didn't work.
From your experience, we could live with this mite and still have a honey industry.
Oh, hell yes. Yes. Every other country in the world does except you. Yes. Yes, you could have your pollination. I mean, at the moment you must be suffering with pollination of your plants.
And how do you feel when you see what's happened here in Newcastle on the Central Coast, which is the epicentre of this outbreak?
I feel very sorry for you. I really do.
All of the amateur beekeepers having their hives destroyed.
It is. It's terrible. And I don't think it's not going to work in the end. Sooner or later you're going to have to just say, sorry, we tried, but it didn't work. I actually have a routine. I will be starting my bee year almost from today. In fact, the 1st of August is when I put in my first spring treatments. They go in for 12 weeks, 10 to 12 weeks, and as soon as they come out in 10 weeks' time, I then put on my honey supers.
What are those treatments, Martin? What do you do?
Well, as I say, there's a couple of different ways you can do it depending on your own routine. They are the one, as I say, one's called Apistan. There's another one called Apivar. There's Bavarol. You know, if you go through the beekeeping, well, I suppose not your beekeeping supplies, but if you to go onto the New Zealand beekeeping sites and have a look through what treatments are available and how much they cost, you get a pretty good idea of what's available in the market these days. And
do they control the mite but not disturb the bee? How do you do that?
Yes, it is. It's a chemical that's on a plastic strip, and it's a slow release. And you put those in. I mean, they've been used over the world for the last 50 years. So they've got it pretty good down to being able to kill the Varroa without killing the bee.
And does it have any impact on the honey or the wax?
Well, as I say, you only have them on when you haven't got the honey on. So if you treat your brood boxes, your brood, to get rid of the mites, because, of course, that's where they are. And then once you take those treatments out after 10 to 12 weeks, then you put on your honey supers after that.
Well, sorry, could you just describe what a honey super is?
Okay. In a hive, you have a division between brood boxes where the queen lays her eggs and raises the young. And then you have a honey box, which is dedicated just for the collection of honey.
Right, and so
it's like two separate sections. One is the brood and nest, and the other one is the honey section.
So one's the nursery, and one's the pantry, so to speak.
Virtually, yes, that's correct. And
right.
You only put the pantry on after you've finished treating the nursery.
Got you, and that's working really well for all of the keepers.
Works perfectly. The whole year, the whole world.
There is hope, even if we can't control it by the sound of it, that we can still have these bees and the great job that they do.
I feel very sorry for your beekeepers, and I certainly hope eventually you can sort something out. But I think it's a time to rather look at the control of Varroa rather than trying to eradicate it totally.
There's Martin Garside, former president of the Auckland Beekeepers Club, and we're going to catch up with one of those beekeepers that he feels sorry for in just a moment. I think we all feel very sorry for them. You hear how their hives have been destroyed here on the Central Coast and the impact that it's having too on agriculture. This beekeeper we're catching up with in just a moment is also a backyard farmer with permaculture methods, so chemical-free. But what do you do when you don't have any bees to pollinate your crop that you survive on? It's 8 to 8. Clara Rosa is a local backyard beekeeper and president of Permaculture Central Coast, who had her hives destroyed in that terrible way we heard Graham Creed describing earlier on. It's pretty sad due to the Central Coast being in the Varroa mite red zone. But Clara's been as busy as a bee, literally. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
You've been hand pollinating. How do you do it? What's the buzz, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing I've got to admit is I don't really have the work ethic of a bee. So when they say busy bees, they're not joking. Like, they get up real early and they go all day. I'll be honest with you, I'm not that motivated.
Yeah, so how have you been doing? I believe you've even been using musical instruments, tuning forks.
Yeah, so there's a few different types of pollination. So most of it, I think something like 1 in 3 bites of our food relies on some type of insect-assisted pollination. So that can be something like cross-pollination, or it can be buzz pollination, or it can be just an assistance from taking the male flower's pollen to the female flower. So in something like some of your fruit trees, like your apples, they may actually require 2 different trees to pollinate. Your apples, your avocados, to get a better yield, you'll need a bee or an insect to transfer the pollen from one tree to another. In something like your cucurbits, like your cucumbers and your pumpkins, that plant will produce both a male and a female flower, but even though they're on the same plant, they still need to be transported from one flower to another. And then there's also buzz pollination, which is where vibration is required to release the pollen from the flower for you to get the better yields. So that's something from the Solanaceae family, like your tomatoes and your eggplants.
And that's where you're pulling out your tuning fork.
That's it. There's a few people who've been pulling out the electric toothbrushes and a few other things, but basically, vibration is what's required for your buzz pollination. So I did do a bit of a video about it if anyone's interested, but basically...
Is that on the Permaculture Facebook or somewhere?
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube. If you look up tuning fork for buzz pollination, hopefully something good will come up there. Or you can look at it on my page, Clara's Urban Mini Farm. But basically, you can see that even if I sort of tap or shake the flower, it won't necessarily release the pollen. I've used a pepino melon to demonstrate this. But once I hit that tuning fork and I get a good vibration, then the pollen will actually spit out and release. So
Well, you just named the song I should be playing. I played Hi Honey Ho. I should be playing Beach Boys' Good Vibrations.
Oh, that's my song request, Scott.
Okay, we'll see if we can get it in before the news. ABC Central Coast, we're speaking with Clara Rosa, who's trying to do the job of the bees, but isn't quite as productive. Look, this is pretty sad, but I guess, we've got to soldier on. What's the cumulative effect in your area on Clara's mini urban farm on pollination due to the loss of hives? Because you weren't the only one who had them, I believe.
Well, I guess the thing we need to say is that we don't know what the effect is going to be. So bees are really good at reproducing. There's hundreds and thousands of bees around all over the Central Coast, or at least there were before this effort to remove them underway. So we don't know what impact that's going to have on our crops and even just our bushland, because of there's going to be all these dead bees around, and what impact were they having out there? So we're not sure.
I believe you had, other hives in your neighbourhood that create that cumulative effect of a lot of bees to do the work.
That's right, and there's nothing that really compares to that. So even though we do have our beautiful and amazing native species, and there's hundreds of them around, they don't reproduce as well as the European honeybee, and they also don't come out when it's cold. So it's going to depend a lot on the weather. Honeybees are bigger, they're more robust, so they're able to fly in the rain, they can avoid the raindrops. Because they come from Europe traditionally, they're adapted to European crops, which is the majority of what we eat, and they're also much better in the cold. So they can tolerate the cold environments, and because they have a hive, they can reproduce in that hive really quickly. So we'll get some pollination from other things, other insects, your dragonflies, your wasps, your native bees, and even birds, bats, all sorts of things, but it's very unlikely to basically do the job of the bees, which are incredibly productive. So we're not 100% sure what the drops in pollination will be in winter, certainly. So in Australia, we're very blessed that we continue to grow food all through winter. So when you go to your Woolies, you notice there's still plenty of food there in winter. But without the honeybees that are cold tolerant, pollinating those crops through the colder days and the colder months is really difficult. Hoping that when things warm up, the natives will be able to do more, but we're also not sure what impact this fipronil baiting is going to have on the natives, because I back onto a reserve. Many of us on the Central Coast are blessed to live near reserve, and that's where a lot of the poison baits are, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully DPI can get back to us on that. We spoke about that earlier in the week with a petition with 33,000 signatories airing similar concerns tabled in Parliament, and yet to hear back from DPI on the evidence-based research they've done to allay those fears that you have there, Clara. Look, thanks.
That was really fantastic piece. I listened to that yesterday. That was really good. I think, people, even just for the government agencies to know that people are concerned, people are paying attention, that's going to change behaviour, hopefully.
All right. Well, we'll hopefully get some answers for you there. Thanks for joining us. Good luck. Keep up the good work. I know you won, not billions, but...
yeah, I'll put my wings back on and get back out there.
Picking up those good vibrations.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clara.